Hey, thanks a lot, Joe. Again, if people could just mute your line so that hopefully it'll go a little bit smoother here. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. And all right. So tonight's program is going to go over, first of all, we're going to start talking about new trout plan that's in place here in New York State and regulations. We're going to go over the project we did to remove the Pike Dam this past summer. Talk about Genesee River angler counts that were done last year. Also our fish population surveys that we did on a number of streams in 2021. Also going to talk about evaluation of catch and release season that we're doing statewide. And we'll have some time for questions at the end. Anyway, I'm coming to you from our fisheries office here in Allegheny. Nice snowy evening. Would much rather be seeing all of you in person, but at least we're able to do it this way. And hopefully by next year, we'll be back in person again. So let's talk about the trout stream management plan. The regulations went into effect this past April 1st. It was quite a project to get that through, but we did get the regulations into effect. As far as how it's working out, we haven't really had a chance to get a lot of feedback from people yet. Doesn't seem to have been a lot of major issues, although a lot of people probably don't even know what's going on yet. So we're still doing a lot of outreach. As far as any changes so far for next year, there really isn't very much. The only thing will be that we're looking at, we're going to be taking the Genesee catch and release section back to the limits, the upper and lower limits that it had in previous years. We'd extended it a little bit this year. I've got some pretty good feedback on why that wasn't the best idea at the lower end. So we're just going to be changing it back to what it was as far as the upstream and downstream limits. That's really the only changes for 2022. And keep in mind, this whole project is a work in progress. We got the regulations into effect. That was the major heavy lift, but there's still a lot of parts of this trout stream management plan that are ongoing and going to be ongoing for several years to come. One of the things that we had to wait a little while for were the regulation signs. So the regs went into effect April 1st. We were not able to get these regulation signs made and out to the regions until October. So we spent a bunch of time in October, November, December running around to a number of the streams, the Wild Premier, the Wild Quality, and the Stocked Extended sections, and getting these regulation signs up so people, if they're out there on the stream, know what regulations are in effect there. Now, in past years, the regulation signs we had up were just that. They were just the regulations. Albany Bureau of Fisheries has decided that they are also going to indicate where we have public access, either public fishing rights, public property, or unposted sections. So these signs aren't going to be up. If there's a section where there's some posting against trespassing, you still may be able to fish there by asking permission, but you won't see the regulation signs because we've got this fishing permitted part. One thing to keep in mind with the trout stream management plan, part of it is driven by the trout populations that we have, the levels of trout that are there as far as whether they might be Wild Quality or Wild Premier. But also it's very much driven by public access. So if there's not public access on the stream, we're really not managing it actively. It's probably just going to fall under the general 5 per day, 2 over 12 regulation. So that's something as we talk here in a minute, you want to probably keep that in mind on why you're not seeing some of the streams show up that are trout streams. One thing I want to talk about are the way we're getting information out to people is changing as far as where that public access is. A lot of you may be familiar with the old public fishing rights maps that we had on our website. These were PDF files. with some pretty nice maps. They had the angler footpaths and parking lots and showed all the public fishing rights. And the first page had some information about the streams themselves. They are still on our website, but you can't get to them by typing in public fishing rights. There's the part of the page where they used to be is not there anymore, but they are still there. The way to do it, and I would recommend if you want to do this soon because it's going to be taken down before long, will be to go into the search part of the website. And in this case, you type in Wiscoy Creek Public Fishing Rights. And the first thing in the search that will come up will be a link to this map. So if there's streams that you want to have some maps, maybe get printed out to have with you, you may want to do that pretty soon before they take these maps down. One thing I will point out, the cover page, the regulations are probably going to be wrong because they haven't been updated on there. One thing you will still see that's accurate is the fish species that are there. What species of trout are you going to find? We'll talk about that in a minute on our new site that does not have that as good. So the site that you're going to be going to now is the DEC info locator. It's used for DEC for a whole number of different things. It's kind of a one-stop shopping type thing is how it's designed. So if you go into this DEC locator map, you're going to go into the DEC information layers and see outdoor activities. And then you go to water related activities for fishing. And then if you click on the inland trout stream layer and you do that zoomed out to the whole state, you're going to see a map that looks something like this. Now keep in mind the red lines are the stocked streams. The purple lines are the ones that are the stocked extended streams. So you can see most of the streams that show up on here are stocked streams. And many of you may look at this and say, that's all the trout streams in New York State? You know, there's more trout streams in Iowa than show up here. And really the only thing you're seeing are stock streams, wild quality, wild premier. The ones that just fall under wild management are not on the site. Some of those streams will be going on the site, but only ones where there's public access, either a bunch of PFR or on public lands. So if we zoom into just the Region 9 portion, this is what the map looks like right now. Again, red is stocked, purple is stocked extended. So that's most of the streams that show up here. And some of you may remember from my past presentations, there's a lot more trout streams in this region. Really, the map would look something more like this. With all those blue lines are just the wild streams that have wild trout here in Region 9. It's almost 650 streams and over 900 miles of streams. So when you go on the info locator, you're not going to be getting the true picture of all the trout streams in the state. So you just need to keep that in mind. I will say, I got to throw this part in, it can be done. It's done if we go just south of where I'm sitting here. If you go on to the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission information locator map and click on what they call natural trout reproduction layer, you're going to see a whole pile of lines like this come up because all their wild trout streams are mapped. If we zoom in on these maps, you're going to see blue lines like that show all the wild trout streams. And if you click on those streams, you're going to get a bunch of information, the stream itself, where that section's located. And the other thing I'll point out is here, Pennsylvania's taken the tack that they're going to just let you know how much of that stream is on public land. There's no public fishing rights in Pennsylvania, so it's all either public land or private land. But in this case, you might see it's 98%. You say, I'm probably not going to have to knock any doors here. But they really put the ball in the angler's court to know it's either public or it's mostly private, and you're going to have to knock on a door. Albany Fisheries has decided we're not taking that tack. We're just going to advertise where the public access streams are. So getting back to the DEC locator map, when you zoom in this case, we're going to zoom into the arcade area because there's a lot of different management types here. There's over on the left-hand side, there's a legend there. So you can see red is stock streams, purple are stocked extended, tan is stocked or wild quality, and green is wild premier. So when you just have the layer up with the categories, this is what you're going to see. If you go down just below that and click on trout stream fishing access. So the wider pink lines are stream access. Once you bring that layer on, that's basically public fishing rights, or in some cases, it might be where there's some public land. One thing to keep in mind, if you look up on the upper left-hand part there on Hosmer Brook, once you bring up that public access layer, it actually messes with the color of the line. So it almost looks like Hosmer Brook is stocked in that section, but it's just because of that pink layer of the public access over that. Right now, they have the angler parking areas are up there, but one thing they don't have there are the angler footpaths. So we have a lot of those in this region, particularly streams like Wiskoy Creek have a dozen of them. The angler footpaths aren't there yet. I'm hoping they will be up, hopefully, maybe by this spring. I've pointed out to our Albany folks, it's very important for getting access, at least in this region. Now, if you go and click on one of the lines here, you get a lot more information about this. And in this case, I clicked on Cattaraugus Creek. It gives you the section of the stream, the management category, in this case, stocked extended, lets you know what those regulations are, both the April 1st to October 15th, and then the catch and release season. And also in this case, because it's stocked, it's going to let you know the number of trout that are stocked, what species are stocked, and also the stocking schedule. One thing it's not telling you are what other species of wild trout are there. And I'm hoping that gets up at some point before long. If you click on one of the wild streams, in this case, Clear Creek there in Arcade, you're going to get a lot of the same information, except it's not stocked. So there's no stocking information. And the other thing is there's no species information there. I'm hoping that's something they get put on there fairly soon, because if I'm going to a new streams, another part of the state, I'm kind of interested. Is this a brown trout stream, a rainbow trout stream, brook trout stream? So again, this is still a work in progress. And I will say we have one guy in the Albany office whose job is to get all this stuff up and running. And he's currently up to his eyeballs in trying to get smartphone apps developed for all this stuff. So he's got a lot of work to do, but hopefully a lot of this will be getting going pretty soon. So I'll take a break at this point and see if Bill has any questions that have been chatted in. Kind of like to see what your thoughts are on the new trout stream plan. Again, we get a lot of feedback, but anything come in yet, Bill?
Yeah, Scott, we did have a couple come in already. One said, could you please let us know why the maps with the PFRs are being taken down, and will they be available elsewhere?
They're being taken down because the Fisheries Bureau, as well as DEC in general, wants to get all the information into this info locator map. They don't want, maps all over the place, all kinds of different maps. They want just everything onto the info locator. So kind of a one-stop shopping type of thing. And it will be easier in the long run to update changes when we get more PFR and things like that. In this system, it's much easier to update that than it would be to go back and change a PDF and keep things up to date. So I think that's probably the main reason. And I know, they've already buried these maps in the site, so they're very hard to find. And I've been told they're going to be taken down. So, if they get taken down, you don't have one, let me know. I have downloaded and kept copies of them. So, they're not gone forever. They just are from our website.
Okay. And a few more came in as you were answering that one. One question is, so Pennsylvania is public, exception is the private. I'm interpreting that as, is the default public and the exception is private? If I've got that question wrong, if you want to retype it in, but maybe you understand that better than I do, Scott.
Yeah, in their map right there, if I'm understanding the question right, in their map, they're just showing where all the streams are. And then they do lists what percentage of that stream is on public land versus private land. So if you click on that stream, it just gives you an idea. Hey, this stream's all on state forest, or hey, this is all on private land. If I want to fish there, I'm probably going to need to go knock on some doors.
So you're going to have to search for it. So you're driving down the road, you're going to kind of figure out if it's posted or not, but bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah, and here we're really just, this plan is driven towards publicly accessible waters. You know, it doesn't mean there aren't regulations that apply to all the waters, they do. It's just, you know, they've decided that we're gonna be pushing the information out to public waters. You know, I personally think we should put it in the anglers' hands and let them make the decision on whether they want to go knock on a door or not. As long as we let them know, hey, there's public access here or there's not, but that's not the way we're doing it right now.
And we got a few more, Scott. They're probably specific to the previous thing. We'll probably get a lot more. So if you got a couple seconds, I'll try to go through
Yep.
these quick because I'm sure they will stack up. One comment was it would be good to have all the trout streams shown on the maps, regardless of whether there is public access. Any thoughts on that?
I agree, but that's, I didn't win on that argument.
Okay.
But that's why we, you know, we're a public agency. We can make those comments to our bureau chief in Albany. If
Another
enough
one,
people do that, maybe things will change, but you know, that's just the decision that they've made.
another attendee wants to know, are the DEC footpaths maintained throughout the year?
The footpaths are, there are signs at the road where the footpaths are. We do not go in and, you know, mow them. We don't cut all the brush on them. We just don't have the staff to be able to do that on all 40 or 50 footpaths that we have every year. That's why having them on the map, so you got a pretty good idea. Does this footpath follow a roadway? Does it just go down a hedgerow? A lot of these are on boundary lines. So, you know, we probably are going to be getting out to put, at least put some tags on trees where we can to maybe make it a little easier to find your way from the road to the stream. But that's where, you know, you kind of need to rely on your own ability to get from the road to the stream. But we do have signs out at the road to indicate where they start.
Okay. And then actually the last two questions are the same question. They must have come in at the same time, but they're asking the same question. Can you print a map from the locator? Yes,
you can. Yep. Okay. Yeah, there's I forget exactly how to do it, but yes, there is a print button on there.
Okay. And that is it for now.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next section. I'm going to talk about the Pike Dam removal project that went on this year. So Pike Dam, well over 100-year-old dam in various forms. Nobody seemed to know exactly when it was built in the present location. So we removed the dam, but we also needed to replace the grade control part of the dam. So basically, there's about a 4-foot drop in the bed elevation between above the dam and below the dam. And if we had just removed the dam, you'd create a lot of stream bed instability. So we needed to put in a structure that would keep that stability there. But we also wanted to do it in a way that would allow fish to get by there. The dam that had been there for, you know, 60, 70 plus years in the form that it was in, very few trout could ever get over that. And I used to be there sometimes in late October, early November, and I saw a lot of trout try to get up onto that dam when past it. I saw a couple make it up onto the boards, but I never saw one that was able to swim all the way up over. So it was pretty much impassable to fish. So we needed to change that. Another thing, there's an accessible fishing platform out in front of it, so we wanted to maintain the good fishing pool that was there. So this was a cooperative effort. The town of Pike, Wyoming County Soil and Water Conservation District, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Western New York TU, and DEC. The project ended up in the $300,000 range, and the funding for the project came from Fish and Wildlife Service, State Council of Trout Unlimited, 2 different grants for $9,000. Also a Save Our Great Lakes grant paid for a large chunk of it. And there was a lot of in-kind services and time from the various agencies as well. Sounds like a lot of money, but when you start looking at dam removal projects, this is actually a pretty small chunk of change for them. And I really have to thank the Fish and Wildlife Service, Tom Hoffman, Did a lot of work in securing the grants for this, as well as Soil and Water Conservation District. And Soil and Water District, they're really set up to accept grants and spend money and get things done. And without these two partners involved, this project never would have happened. So a little history on it. This is some stuff that the town of Pike had, and from 1954. This is a picture of the dam, pretty much in the same form that it's been right up to 2021. Probably a few things done to it, but it was pretty much the same dam in 1954. And I found this was kind of an interesting picture also from 1954. It appears that the sucker fishing was pretty good in this pool, based on that guy's catch right there. Looks like probably an early season. With this being impassable to fish, when the white suckers were running upstream to spawn, they were probably piled up in this pool. And this guy had some pretty good luck in there for some pretty good sized white suckers. And I assume the trout fishing was okay too. So by say 2008 or 9, when I think this picture was taken, the dam has not been maintained in a long time, and it's starting to really show it. You can start seeing pieces of concrete falling apart here. And then by 2014, when we had built this accessible fishing platform, things are continuing to go downhill. You can see some pretty sizable holes where the boards are missing on one section and large chunks of concrete on another. You see we've got trees and shrubs growing out of the dam, which is never recommended for your dam doing well. So there just hasn't been any maintenance. Town of Pike did not have money to do things like this, but they were starting to get kind of worried about the safety of this with kids playing around it and things like that. So in 2018, the town came to me and said, you know, we need to do something here, but we got no money. You know, how can we do this? And we knew there were issues going on for a while, but we finally said, okay, we need to do something. So we got a work group together with all the different agencies and started looking into what can be done here. And in order to do this, we contracted out a feasibility study in 2019 to run all the numbers and do the hydraulics and everything, and come up with some alternatives, everything from fixing what's here to removing it and doing it in different ways. So a feasibility study was done in 2019. It also gave us a cost estimate. So in 2020, we went out and started looking for grants, ways to fund this project. And in 2020, we identified enough money to do the project. So in early September, we started with the project. And the first step here was to get the water bypassing where we were going to be doing most of the work. So we did a temporary bypass channel on the far northern side of the dam. That's what you see here. And once the water's not flowing over anymore and the boards have been taken off, you kind of get an idea what the underside of the dam looked like. It was definitely falling apart at that point. And also we wanted to get the water pumped down out of the pool below the dam to work more in the dry, as well as salvaging fish that were in there. So we had some pretty large pumps to pump water around. And in case anybody ever wondered what the bottom of the pool looked like below the dam, that's what it looked like. And right there you can see about 30 trout still swimming around in there. We moved probably 40 or 50 adult trout and a bunch of other smaller fish out of the pool, put them back over into the bypass channel and got them out of there so they wouldn't be sucking too much mud when we were doing the project. So this project involved a lot of very large rock. These are not rocks that a bunch of TU members are going to go out and move by hand. This is stuff weighing many tons, but it's a large stream, powerful stream. We needed big rock. It started out by digging a very deep base to this. We were going down 8 feet below the bottom of the pool to install the base of the structure, because we need something that's not going to get undercut during high flows. You know, kind of see the way we built this structure, the base of it needs to be very solid and stay in place, or the whole rest of the structure could fall apart. So the base rocks that are put in here, I believe the contractor said some of these were 40,000-pound rocks. They were very impressive. And that's what you see on top where that red arrow, that's the top layer. There's another layer of those below that. So you start out with a very large, heavy base to build off of. And then you build it kind of like dominoes, shingles. You can see the red arrow showing the direction of the stream flow here. The rocks are put in place so that each one is laying against the one below it. And the water flowing over it will compress each rock down into the one below it and hold it in place. The other thing it does, these rocks are all staggered, so there's lots of pockets of slow water within these. So you've got resting pools for fish to move up through these riffles. And this is what he's constructing, the center or the low flow section. This was where the water will be most of the time. And it's built-in compression. This is called an engineered rock riffle. It's basically, like the name says, we're building a riffle very similar to how nature actually does it. We're just doing it on a man-made scale. So the red arrow shows where that center section is completed. And as we move out to the wings of this, we're going to have those sloping up towards the outside. So as the stream flow increases during floods, the water is going to rise up those, and those are built with lots of nooks and crannies as well. So at any stream flow, short of Hurricane Agnes or something, the fish are going to be able to move up through the structure along the edges where the water's slower in those pockets. So the structure is designed to work pretty much at anything from low flow up to a pretty good sized flood. So that's the south wing of it that's been completed, and he's getting ready to start moving on the north wing. And there's a picture with the whole thing completed, and the stream's been put back into the low flow channel. Here's a picture from downstream at the base of the pool, so you can kind of see that grade, 3 or 4 feet difference in grade. But it's designed with all those nooks and crannies for fish to be able to rest and move their way up through here during low flow, and then they work their way up the edges during high flow. This is a picture of the highest flow we've had so far. This was back, I think, in the end of October, and certainly the creek will get a lot higher than this at times, but you can kind of get an idea of how that structure is working. And this higher flow, when the stream is concentrated towards the center of the stream, help to keep that pool scoured out. So were there any questions on that so far?
No one typed anything in that section, but I did have a question. The size of the rocks fascinates me. And I guess what I'm wondering, I'm sure there's a science to it. How do they determine like what size you'd need minimum for that stream? You said it's a big, body of water, et cetera, but what's the criteria? Like, how do they evaluate it to know what size to bring in? Because obviously if they brought the wrong size in, it would be all for nothing. So how do they?
There's specific DOT standards of rock that they use. Most of these are DOT heavy or DOT extra heavy rock. And we were really fortunate in this project because the contractor actually owned his own quarry. So he was able to, once he knew what we were doing, he was able to blast the rock in sizes he wanted and pick and choose what he wanted for the project. A lot of these projects, the contractor just goes up to a pit in Niagara County and gets whatever they give him. And sometimes there's a fair amount of waste rock. We really didn't have a lot of waste rock in this project because he brought the ones he needed in the amounts that he needed. So it worked out really well because of that. And this is a contractor that's done a lot of work for Fish and Wildlife Service on stream restoration projects before. So he knew what he was doing and knew the materials he needed to do it.
Okay. And another question did come in. Let's see what it is here. Do you anticipate more natural reproduction with fish being able to move up further upstream?
It'll be interesting because one of the things we've noticed, we have our fish sampling site at the fairgrounds is located upstream of this about a third of a mile or so. And one of the things we've noted is that one traditionally has always had the lowest number of young of the year trout. And I've always wondered if it's because the trout from that section in the fall swim upstream to spawn, and the fish that would have replaced those by swimming upstream from below couldn't get there because of the dam. So it will be interesting in the future to see if the number of young of the year in the section that we sample upstream of the dam increases. I think it may, but it's something we'll be able to find out. But that's a good question, good thought.
Okay. Oh, that's it for now.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next section. One of the things we're always trying to do is to try to get a better handle on how much fishing's going on. Last year I talked about an angler survey that was done on Cattaraugus Creek and a number of tributaries in 2019 and 20. This past year, we did some counts on the Genesee River. We hadn't done anything to know how much fishing was going on there since 1993. So this was not a full year angler survey like the Cattaraugus was. It was a much shorter one, but it did give us a pretty good estimate of the use that was going on there. The counts were done between April and June. It was on the Genesee River itself. And while we were out there, we also looked at 3 stock tributaries, Vandermark, Dyke, and Kreider Creeks, all in the Wellsville area. So we went out, counted anglers April 1st, and also on 4 randomly selected weekend days per month. This followed a statewide methodology. It's called the statewide mini creel. So instead of doing a full blown out there 4 days a week type thing, they've developed, back in the early 90s, we developed some methodology to get some pretty good results with a lower number of count days. So the estimated use that we came up, because this methodology came from the early 1990s, the season back then, if some of you remember, trout season closed September 30th. So the estimated season with this methodology is actually April to September. So it doesn't follow our current season, and on the Genesee didn't follow the fact it was open year round. So some results. The estimated use on the Genesee River in 2021, over 45,000 hours of fishing. So that's over 20,000 angler trips. So that puts it right up there with what we found for Cattaraugus Creek itself as being pretty much the heaviest fish streams in our region. We found much lower use on those 3 stock tributaries, 160 to 600 trips for the season. As we expect, a lot less use. The Genesee is much larger, much more popular stream. And should keep in mind the estimate for the Genesee is a conservative estimate because it didn't count the angler use when the season was open before April 1st or also in October when breeders are stocked and a lot of people are out there. And we had some beautiful weather in the end of March, and there were a lot of people fishing from what I heard, but we didn't count those people. So this is a conservative estimate. There was probably actually a fair amount more use that went on. But the use was lower than we found in 1985 or 93. But we can't directly compare it because the sections that were sampled were a little bit different. The methods were a little bit different in those surveys. But, we know that on all our stock trout streams, the use is a lot lower than it was in the 80s and 90s. But still, the Genesee is one of the most heavily fished streams, right up there with Cattaraugus Creek. I'm going to move on into our trout population estimates that we did in 2021 on a number of streams. First of all, I'd like to thank the folks that were able to be out there. Justin Brewer from the office here, he was the one that coordinated all this survey work and coordinated with the volunteers. Also Chris Driscoll, Mike Todd from the Buffalo office, Jim Zanette, our technician down here. Fish and Wildlife Service, Tom Hoffman was out a number of days, vital to the effort. And we were able to use seasonals again this year, which I should say we were able to use volunteers again this year. We did have seasonals, although 2 of our 3 seasonals left to other jobs in June and July. So we were limited in that. So the angler volunteers that we were able to use again this year were vital to getting that effort done. So many thanks to you folks. I was not able to be out there for a lot of the survey work this summer just because of my life, but we were able to get quite a bit done thanks to all these folks. So the estimates that we were looking at this year, the objective we were doing was to estimate the trout populations in those streams, in a number of the streams, at the beginning of our new trout management regulations. To kind of get a baseline feel for what the trout populations are like the first year of the regulations going into effect. Is a little different than what we've been doing from 2016 to 2020, where we were really trying to look more at regional trends and trying to look at changes at individual sites from one year after another. That wasn't really the objective here. We were just trying to estimate those trout populations in those streams to see how they fit with our new management categories. Because of that, we did fewer streams, but in most cases, we did more sites on each stream to get a better snapshot of the population in that individual stream. And overall, like I said, we weren't able to do quite as much work as past years. I was not able to be out there, and again, we lost some of our seasonals throughout the summer, but we still did get a fair amount done. We sampled on 9 streams, so 6 streams that fall into the wild quality category and 3 under the wild premier category. On those 9 streams, we sampled at 25 sites. The map here, you can see where those streams were. A lot of the ones that we've traditionally done in the past. Some of the sites were ones that we had been doing each year from 2016 to 2020, but we also added some additional sites as well. So for the wild quality streams, and the ones that are in that management type, I just wanted to talk about what the minimum criteria for the trout populations here to be in the wild quality. They should have at least 300 fish per mile, adult fish, or at least 40 pounds per acre of biomass. So it doesn't have to be both. It's an either or thing. Those streams need to be at least 10 feet wide, and they need to have at least some public access or a fair amount of public access, not a lot of posting. So the first stream we looked at is Elm Creek over in Randolph in Cattaraugus County. And on the graph here, I'm going to point out a few things. The red lines that I put in, I've just put them on the first one here to show you those are those minimum criteria, 300 fish per mile or 40 pounds per acre. So the left-hand side of the graph, that's numbers of adult fish per mile. The right-hand side is the biomass or pounds per acre. So for Elm Creek, we sampled at 2 sites. And you can see we're about 900 fish per mile and about 65 pounds per acre. So very good trout population in there. Very, easily fits into wild quality category. Reproduction was fairly low at one site, moderate at the other site in 2021 for brown trout. Tributary to Elm Creek is the Ram, small stream, so we only had 1 site there. But again, a good population, 750 fish per mile and almost 100 pounds per acre of biomass in this stream. Very cold stream. It's a stream that really makes Elm Creek good because it brings the cold water into it. Reproduction was also fairly low this year in the Ram. So both of those streams in the same area. Fenton Brook. This is over in western Cattaraugus County, tributary to Conowongo Creek. We only were able to sample 1 site there. We had planned to do 2 or 3, but because we had a lot of rain later this summer, and so between stream flows not cooperating and staffing issues, we were only able to get to 1 site, but we had sampled that site 11 different times. And there we're over 600 fish per mile and about 90 pounds per acre. So another very good population there, easily into the wild quality category. And at this site, we had very high reproduction. It was actually the best reproduction we've measured in any of the 11 sampling years. So they're doing really well in that stream, at least at that site for spawning in 2021. Mansfield Creek, again, central Cattaraugus County, and this is one with browns and rainbows. So we have 2 sites, sampling sites there. And this is combined brown and rainbow trout populations. We're almost 700 fish per mile there. The lower site was all brown trout. The upper site had quite a few rainbow trout, and we're up over 40 pounds per acre there as well. Rainbow trout reproduction was fairly low this year, while the brown trout reproduction was quite high. And we've been seeing that trend with low reproduction of rainbow trout for several years now, and that was the case again 2021. Okay, moving to the north branch of Wiskoy Creek. We did 2 sampling sites there, and you notice that the scales have changed on both the left and right hand side of the graph here. We're up over 1,200 fish per mile in the north branch and 190 pounds per acre there. So the north branch Wiskoy is a trout factory. It's very fertile, it's very cold, and it can support a lot of trout where there's good habitat. And reproduction was relatively high in there compared to most streams. So another good year of reproduction in the North Branch. Trout Brook, another major tributary to Wiskoy Creek. We had 2 sampling sites there as well. You can see it's another site where we got some really nice sized brown trout. I think that one was about 19 inches. And here we've got brown trout and some brook trout, particularly at the upper side at Hillside Road. We've got a lot of brook trout, only a few down at our Hardy's Road site. But again, we're up over 1,200 fish per mile and about 110 pounds per acre. So another very good trout population in this stream. Reproduction was very high down at the Hardy's Road site for brown trout. It was pretty low at the Hillside Road, but a beaver had taken up residence in our sampling site. So most of this site was a beaver pond, which doesn't tend to be very good for young of the year habitat, you know, silty bottom and that kind of thing. So we didn't expect to see a lot of young of the year up at that Hillside Road site, and we didn't. But it was very good down at the Hardy's Road site. Okay, moving on to the wild premier streams. We did 3 of these, and I'm going to talk about the minimum criteria here. The bar is set a little bit higher. In order to fit into this management category, it should have at least 500 fish per mile or at least 60 pounds per acre of trout biomass. And also these streams need to be greater than 20-foot average width, and the sections need to be at least 3 miles long, and they need to have very abundant public access. So the first one we looked at, Clear Creek and Arcade. And again, I put the minimum bars in here on this one, 500 fish per mile, 60 pounds per acre. And you can see Clear Creek was over that minimum. Those numbers are, you know, a decline from what we saw in the 90s and 2000s for sure. And most of that decline was in rainbow trout. Brown trout, for the most part, they're down a little bit, but they're mostly holding their own. But the decline there is mainly in rainbow trout, particularly at our lower 3 sites. They're holding their own at our upper site, but down at the lower sites. So we had 4 sites on Clear Creek and Arcade. And again, this is combined brown and rainbow trout. So we're over 600 fish per mile there and a little over 60 pounds per acre. Brown trout reproduction was high at our sites this year. Rainbow trout reproduction was low, except at our upstream most site. And we had the most young of the year there that we've had in any of the 14 sampling years there. Not sure exactly how to explain that, except the upper section still seems to be conducive to rainbow trout, where the rest of the stream is not doing as well. But browns are holding their own. Okay, moving on to Wiskoy Creek. We did 6 sites here on Wiskoy Creek. That's the gray cabin site that you see in the picture there, and a nice fish about 19 inches long, I think, from down at the Pond Road site. So the population here, almost 800 fish per mile and almost 80 pounds per acre. And again, those are declines from what we saw in the 90s and 2000s. But those numbers have remained fairly steady in the last 6-7 years of sampling. So, you know, we've seen declines, but it's not continuing to decline. It's kind of leveled out, and we seem to see maybe the new normal for our populations here in Wiskoy Creek in the 2020s at this point. Reproduction was above the long-term average at all 6 of our sites this year. So overall, on most of these streams, looked like brown trout reproduction was pretty good, and that was the case with the Wiskoy. The last stream we did was Clear Creek over in Ellington in far western Cattaraugus and eastern Chautauqua counties. And we did 5 sampling sites there. Again, got some nice sized trout. And you see, again, our scale has changed here because we're over 1,200 fish per mile. Primarily brown trout. There's a very small population of rainbow trout here as well. But mainly browns, so over 1,200 fish per mile and about 110 pounds per acre. So Clear Creek Ellington really ranks up there as one of our best streams in the region, particularly for larger streams. And brown trout reproduction was good by and large at all 5 of our sites as well. So to kind of put that all together of our overall findings, All of the streams that we sampled, the wild quality and wild premier streams, exceeded or greatly exceeded the minimum population levels to have them in those management categories. Adult brown trout abundance seems to be hanging in there, maintaining itself pretty good. You know, up a little bit, down a little bit at some of the sites, but overall pretty similar. Rainbow trout abundance still seems to be declining in the Cattaraugus Creek watershed. Overall, don't have a lot of great reasons for that. My best guess is they've been having poor reproduction, probably due to weather events in the springtime when they're spawning and the eggs are incubating. Maybe some temperature issues going on, but they should be just about as tolerant as brown trout. So I don't think it's necessarily a temperature issue. Brown trout reproduction for the most part was good or very good in 2021. And again, rainbow trout reproduction fairly poor in 2021. So stop here. Bill, are there specific questions that come in on that yet?
Yeah, we did have a few come in. Let me scroll back a little bit. One said, will you be doing any an acoustic tagging project to track trout movement? Boy, let me say that again. Will you be doing an acoustic tagging project to track trout movement, for example, an acoustic telemetry project?
We don't have any plans to do that right now. You know, it's something we've thrown around a little bit at the Pike Dam to try to see as far as fish movement up through there. There's some ways that we could do that with something that's called pit tags, and then you have a reader array that's upstream to see if fish move over it. We may be looking at doing something like that, but we don't have any real acoustic telemetry projects planned. Not a great, you know, we don't have a real good objective for doing that right now. So we don't do projects just to do things. We really need to make sure we're trying to find out by doing them. So we don't have a reason for doing that right now. So there's nothing planned in that regard.
Okay. Another one that came in, are the tribs public access? This came in when you were, like, I think doing the Wiskoy one, but it may be beyond Wiskoy.
There's public fishing rights on
It was before the Wiskoy. It was down around Genesee area. You had a
Okay,
couple of them
sorry,
feeding into there.
Okay, yeah, those tributaries down there. Crider Creek has public fishing rights on it. Dyke Creek and Vandermark do not. They're just sections that don't have posting. But
Which means what?
Crider Creek has a fair amount of public fishing rights on it.
So I don't know if they heard your follow-up question, David. Are you asking, like, if it isn't posted
Yes.
as access, but it's not posted as no trespassing, is that the question you had, David?
Yes, that's exactly. Can you go there?
Yeah, so basically, yeah, if we're stocking it and it's not posted, I think you can assume that you can fish there. I will say, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I know right now we're in the process of sending out letters to landowners, at least at stocking locations, to get them to say they're giving permission for the public to fish there. It's never really been a problem in this region. You know, if it's posted, we don't stock it, and we'll try to talk with the landowner. But apparently in some parts of the state, it's an issue. So some of our folks have felt that we need to start getting more formal permission. We'll see how that goes. So right now, you know, if we're stocking it, it's a stocking point. It should not be posted, so you should be okay to fish there. I mean, it doesn't hurt to knock on a door and ask, but you know, certainly if we have fishing rights, you don't have to do that. But again, if it's, you know, if you see no trespassing signs, it doesn't mean you can't fish there. It just means you need to talk to that landowner first. But if it's posted, we're not going to be stocking trout there. So I hope that kind of answers that question.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
A few more have come in. Is Elm Creek stock extended creek browns only?
Elm Creek is wild quality. It's not stocked at all.
Okay. And this one, so are the still photos available from your presentation? I'm wondering if that means like for purchase. Like, do you have?
Oh, I'll send them to you. I won't
Okay.
charge you.
Okay, yeah. So, if you want to email me after the program or tomorrow, I can get them to Scott, and
Yeah.
maybe we can.
And I'm going to have my email address up there at the end.
And I'm going to read this one, David. This is you again. I'm going to make sure I'm reading it correctly. It says, "Can you put in a cheap and cheerful mayfly monitor, for example, at I think that's Owatka Creek? Did I say that right?"
Yes. I watched a presentation the other day, and like for $1,500, they got this monitor, and you stick the probe also in the water, and so they get a little solar panel on top, and they get feedback on how the water level is, plus the mayfly count and all that other type of stuff. And it's, and I guess my question is, if it's, and they said it was $1,500, but I mean, you're talking about the habitat along some of these declining rainbows. I'm just wondering if organizations chipped in and put those type of monitors just to get some type of feedback. Does that make sense?
It certainly could, and it depends on, what they're actually measuring and I guess what you're trying to find out. There's a lot of different factors that can go into, whether trout are doing well or not. It can be temperature, it can be the sediment load, it can be flooding, it can be the food supply. So there's a lot of different things you could look into. And some of those things may be, you know, maybe something that could be measured like that would help. People have for years been saying to me, well, we don't see the mayfly hatches on stream X like we used to. And, I got no way to say one way or another, because even the monitoring that our Division of Water does, where they look at the insects in the stream, they are just looking at what species are there, because they're looking for water quality by seeing what species, whether there's very intolerant species like mayflies and stoneflies that can't handle pollution. And they're just looking at whether they're there or not, but they're not looking at the biomass of them, the numbers of them. So we have nothing, that DEC measures to say there's less insects now than there used to be, or more, because we've never measured that. So things like that, you could go out and you could go count mayflies right now, but if you don't have something to compare them to, all you would know is that they're there. There's some of them there, and that can tell you something, because if they're not, you may have some water quality problems, but it really doesn't tell you any changes. So kind of a long way to answer your question, but I guess I would say yes, there could be useful things we could get out of that, but we would have to look at what we're trying to find out and whether that's a useful way to find it out.
And a few more have come in, Scott. I guess it makes sense to go through them if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Let me get back to that one. What will it take to get better rainbow trout reproduction and survival, in your opinion? Adding woody debris for habitat, water temperature, adding trees in the area of flood damage, especially lower Clear Creek, closer to Arcade?
Well, we can't control what's going on with the weather. When we have big flood events that happen to occur, at inopportune times for the reproduction, we can't really affect that. We can affect the quality of the habitat in the stream. You mentioned, the riparian streamside areas, and anything we can do to slow down the flood flows, so not ripping up the stream as much, is good. Getting things planted on the bank so the banks aren't eroding, that can help. But if it actually is weather related, flood events that are just getting bigger because of changes to the climate, that's a tough one to be able to affect, if that's affecting the reproduction. If there are other factors, if the habitat quality is not good for them to go from being young of the year trout up to yearling and adult trout, if we're missing that in-stream habitat, now that's where we can make some difference by improving that habitat, making it better cover so that predators can't get to them as well, or just having more places for the fish to hang out and survive and feed. That's something we may be able to improve. But reproduction is a tough one because we know for the most part with trout that it's driven by weather events, particularly flooding and the timing of flooding and the intensity of it.
Another question, I remember this being a question before, not in this program, but will the changes in the regulations allowing fishing year round now put additional stress on the rainbow spawning season?
I don't think so, because the rainbow spawning season lasts in our streams. It lasts into at least late April, early May. And that's a period that's already been open and the heaviest fish time of the year. So we're not going to see any changes there. There will be a little bit more fishing going on in March, but you got to keep in mind on most of all these streams we're talking about, we've had a season that's been open for 15, 20 years on these streams. So I highly doubt it, but that is one reason we're doing our study. I'm going to talk about that here shortly, our 3-year study to look at the impacts, if there are any, on trout reproduction from having the year-round season. It's a statewide study that we're doing because not much has changed here in Region 9. We've been doing this for 20 years. A lot of the rest of the state hasn't been. And there's a lot of concern, particularly down in the Catskills, that it was going to end life as we know it, which I'm pretty confident it's not going to. But no, that's certainly a legitimate question and something we're looking into. Really don't see a reason why it would be affecting the rainbow trout and not the brown trout. Probably more use going on in the fall than in March when rainbows are spawning, and certainly they've been spawning in April when we've been tromping all over them for many, many years, and it wasn't a problem.
We do have about 4 or 5 more chats that have come in. It's up to you whether we want to address them now or do it when you're done. I'm sure either way we'll be getting to them, but whatever you think is best for you.
Oh, we're going pretty long here. Let me blast through the rest of this, and then might want to do the questions at the end. Okay. Yep. All right. So as I was alluding to, we're starting to do an evaluation of any potential impacts of that catch and release season. One part of it was doing angler counts just to find out how many people are fishing out there, first of all. So this was part of the statewide effort to evaluate that catch and release season. And we're measuring angler use on some of our streams, particularly our higher use streams, between October 15th and December 15th. So basically through the brown trout spawning season. I had talked to some folks about whether we needed to do that through the spring as well to try to look into rainbow trout spawning time, but the decision was made to just limit this to brown trout. That was where most of the comments and concerns were in the Catskills, was during the fall. We also, combined with this, we did some sampling specifically to look at young of the year trout that we did this in August. This was separate from our adult trout population estimates. We do pick up young of the year when we're doing those other streams, but we're not actually estimating their populations. It requires more intensive sampling, actually 3 electrofishing passes instead of 2, but we did do some of that as well. Pardon me. So the streams that we did this work on, and the ones in red, Wiscoy Creek and the North Branch, were the ones where we did the young of the year electrofishing sampling as well. And then we also did angler counts on Trout Brook, Clear Creek and Arcade, Lime Lake Outlet, and Elton Creek. So this batch of streams were ones that we were able to do rapid angler counts within a 2-hour period. And we did 2 of these each day on randomly selected days throughout that October through mid-December period. And as I fully expected, our use was very low on all of those waters that we sampled here, we counted. It ranged from 1.5 hours per acre, per surface acre of fishing on Trout Brook, up to 9 hours per acre on Lime Lake Outlet. Wiscoy Creek, for instance, was at 3.5 hours per acre. Not a lot of use. And to kind of put that into perspective, the last angler surveys, year-round angler surveys that were done on the Wiscoy estimated 200 to 300 hours per acre throughout the year. So that 3.5 hours per acre in that October to December period is pretty low use. And that's what was found on almost all the water statewide. The only exceptions were the West Branch of the Delaware and Esopus Creeks, which had pretty high use. Of course, they're a lot closer to bazillions of people in New York City. And the Esopus Creek was always open till the end of November anyway. So a lot of people were used to fishing that in the fall. But those were the only two that came out really high. So angler use was, as we expected, quite low on these waters. And these same surveys are going to be repeated this year and also in 2023. And then we'll put it all together and see if it looked like the amount of use that we had would explain any changes we saw in young of the year numbers. And again, we didn't really change anything regulation wise here in Western New York. The changes were more in the southeastern part of the state. So if you're going to see changes, that's probably where you'd see them. As far as our plans for this coming summer, 2022, we are probably going to be doing an angler use survey over on Goose Creek. That's one of our 4 stocked extended waters. And we don't have any survey work. We think it gets a fair amount of use, but we just haven't done any angler survey work over there. We may be doing some counts on some other creeks as well, some of the other stock streams, just to try to get an idea of the use. We will be doing some more trout population assessments on our wild quality, wild premier streams, some of the ones we didn't hit this year, and we probably will redo some of the ones that we did in 2021 as well. And I fully anticipate we'll be able to use volunteers again, and we really rely on you to help out on these surveys. We're going to be continuing that statewide assessment of the catch and release season. And also, it looks pretty good that we're going to be doing a fairly substantial stream bank stabilization and habitat improvement project on Wiscoy Creek. The lower left-hand picture here is at the Gray Cabin. For years, we've been seeing the creek eat into that cornfield, and we finally said maybe it's time to arrest that erosion a little bit, get some buffer in there, get something planted on the banks, and the farmer realizes he's going to lose the field one way or another. So he's going to give us a little bit of land there to work with and get that bank protected. And we're also going to be installing a bunch of lunker structures on the lower part where there's already a nice little undercut bank, and try to preserve that as good trout habitat as well. So it's looking pretty good to be able to get that project done this summer. And Western New York Trout Unlimited is a partner on that project. We're going to be relying on you guys for help on building those lunker structures. So Joe will be talking to you a lot more about that as we get closer to doing it. Probably some tree planting there as well. One little video I just wanted to throw in here. Something I took last fall on a brook trout stream. This is a pair of spawning brook trout. The female is the larger one up front, and the one behind is the male, kind of chasing her around. These fish are probably 8, 9 inches long. And you can see the area they're in is where she's dug the gravel out, and the pile of gravel is behind them. So they're gonna spawn and lay eggs in there, and she's gonna go upstream and push some more gravel with her tail back down into that hole and cover those up. So if you're looking to kind of see what a brook trout spawning red looks like, or brown trout, that's what you're going to see. So neat little video that I shot last fall. And with that, that's pretty much what I have. So we can go through questions that you have. Again, if you got questions, comments, anything, there's my email address down there at the bottom. I'll leave that up there for a second before I take us off the screen sharing. But what other questions you have there, Bill?
I was still muted. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going to get back to some of the ones that came in earlier. And remind me, Scott, when you finally do take down the screen, I want to put in the chat box when you can see the chat box. One of the attendees was asking if they had the correct site for the locator. And rather than read you the address, because I'd probably read it wrong if you want to take a look at it, but we can wait till the end when you take down that screen so you can see the chat box.
Okay.
Let's see, what was this one here? We got that one. Got this one. When will the new when we come out with this year's schedule? Did I ask that one earlier or did I not get to that one?
Not yet.
Okay.
As far as the stream sampling, I'll be sending emails out to the 140 people or whatever on my list right now. Probably about mid-May or so, we should have a pretty good idea of what streams we're going to be doing. And then usually what I do is send out the schedule at the beginning of each month. So sometime in early June and July and August, I'll be sending out the schedule. So with more details on meeting times and exact dates.
Okay. The next one here is a little bit two-part. Looks like someone responded to the question, so I'll read both these things and have you weigh in. The question was, are rainbows more temperature sensitive than browns? And then another attendee said, Scott said no, but it seems like rainbows certainly prefer faster, more oxygenated water, which counteracts the effects of warmer water temperatures a little. Comments on that?
Yeah, their upper temperature thermal limits are very similar, but rainbow trout do need more dissolved oxygen than brown trout. So that answer that they had was pretty much right on. That is one reason, particularly you did tend to find rainbows in faster water. But their actual temperature tolerances are similar, but they do need a higher amount of oxygen.
Okay.
And as water warms up, it can hold less oxygen, but riffle areas, faster water areas will have a higher oxygen amount as well. And it also helps brown trout. One place you really see that is in the lower Wiskoy Creek, down in the village of Wiskoy, below the waterfalls. Water temperatures hit pretty close to 80 degrees or into the 80s down there, which would normally say we're not going to find wild trout down there, but we do find fairly good numbers. And the reason is that water is so highly oxygenated coming over the falls that it allows the trout to survive at those higher temperatures, even though because all that oxygen in the water, even though the temperatures are quite warm.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Let's see. Does the Division of Water have any plans to upgrade the stream classifications for potential? And then I see in parentheses the letter T and then also TS waters that are properly classified. I think I read that a little clunkily. Do you want me to reread it?
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, I've talked about water reclassifications because we know there's hundreds of streams in this region that have trout that are not classified as trout streams in our regulations as far as people needing permits to do work in them. And that just does not seem like it's going to happen. There's no mechanism in place or the staffing to do it right now. We were very close last year to not needing that because there was legislation that was passed in both the Senate and Assembly that it was very simple. All it would have done is to require a permit from DEC to work in any stream class C or higher. It didn't have to be a T or a TS designation as far as being a trout stream. And then we would have needed to do no reclassification to have those streams be protected by regulations. It was vetoed by the governor. So we lost a golden opportunity to protect hundreds and hundreds of streams just in this region and thousands across the state because of that. But I don't see our Division of Water being able to do upgrades anytime in the near future. There's been no movement on it.
Okay. This person has a question on impassable barriers or dams. If work is being done to allow fish to pass through them, how do you verify that the fix is working?
The best way to do that is to again, to be able to mark those fish when they're downstream with what's called a PIT tag, passive integrated transponder tag. I think that stands for. It's a tiny little tag that you shove in the fish's nose, and basically then you put an array upstream that will read that tag. So you put it upstream of the dam or culvert or whatever, and it just reads whether the fish went upstream past that. So that's a way to do it. It's, you know, it's complicated because those arrays run on electricity, so you have to have them always electrified with a generator or plug them in someplace. Fairly expensive to do. Another way to do it, and a way we've done it in the past, is just to go and take a bunch of fish from upstream, do a fin clip on them, you know, do a little adipose fin clip, put them downstream of the barrier, and then go back and sample fish upstream again and see if you find any that moved up through there. So that's kind of the low-tech way to do it. Both of them require a fair amount of work, and one it requires a lot more expense, but those would be the two main ways that you would look at that.
Okay. And then another comment here, it says, it's interesting that we have good brown trout populations while Montana has declining brown trout. Do you want to weigh in on that?
I can't really, because I'm not up on too much of Montana stuff, other than I get Montana Outdoors, which is a really good magazine. And I guess I have read some stuff on it, and, you know, they've had some horrendous droughts out there, droughts, fires, dewatering for irrigation, things like that. So at least some of their declines in some waters are probably related to that. High water temperatures. I know out west last fall in Montana, they had a number of streams were closed after noon or something, a lot of the days, just because the water got so warm, they didn't want people stressing them out.
Interesting fact, I watched a Montana presentation to your counterpart a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
And the brown trout there, they have some type of fungus on the top of their head. Mm-hmm. They call it a cheese fungus, and they don't know why. And the person asked, well, why don't you get a test? And they lost their biologist like last year, so they have no one to test. It's like they had pictures and they get more and more, and they don't know if it's a sunburn or whatever, but the top of the brown trout, the whole head looks, the brains aren't exposed, but it looks like there is a fungus there. Have you ever seen that here in New York?
It's not something we've seen here, and not anything I'm familiar with. Certainly they've had whirling disease out there, and that really hammered their rainbow trout populations in a lot of waters out west. A lot of them are recovering now. It's kind of the ones that were less susceptible to it that survived are the ones that are passing their genes along. So I think the rainbow trout, you know, we've got whirling disease here in New York State, but it's never impacted our populations that we've seen. We've sampled it. We know it's there, but we haven't seen those impacts. It's probably something to look at with a rainbow trout again. But again, we've never seen fish exhibiting whirling disease issues. So, you know, I don't know the answer to, I wish I knew the answer to why some of our populations are declining here, no less what's going on in Montana.
Another question is, has the DEC identified any stream improvement projects for this year?
The main one is that Wiscoy Creek at Gray Cabin project.
Okay. Any plans to remove any culverts in the near term?
Not right now. We don't have any funding projects, although I have sent a couple of town highway departments to our Albany folks that have access to some funding, I think, to try to help them with some of them. But we don't have any specifically in mind right now.
Okay.
A few years ago, I had some funding that we are able to get a couple of them fixed, but I don't have that funding source right now.
Another one says, can you put up directions on how to search for the former stream PFR maps? I don't know if that's something you're able to put up on your screen, or is that something that maybe you want to send to me after, and maybe we can put it in a newsletter or something?
Basically, when you're on the DEC website, there's a search box, and type in the name of the stream you're interested in getting the fishing rights maps for, you know, whatever, Wiscoy Creek. Type in Wiscoy Creek and then public fishing rights. So the name of the stream and public fishing rights in the search engine. And when you get a list of results, right near the top should probably be a PDF map, and you can click on that.
Okay.
There used to be a part of our fisheries website was public fishing rights streams, and you could go in there and choose each region and each stream, but that part of it's gone. So they're still there. They're just not advertised. So you have to go in the back door to find them. But I don't think they're going to be up there a long time.
Okay. And this one, I think you answered already. That's probably came in before, you know, when the other question was still there. What would it take to get trout streams reclassified? I think that was the similar to the earlier question about that. Did we already address that?
Yeah, basically it's a formal process, has to go through, we've got them all proposed, the paperwork's all done, but it has to go through the formal hearing process, which is a pretty large deal and just doesn't seem to be going to happen.
Okay. Another comment, I've been told that the legislation you spoke about that was passed last year will be reintroduced this year. Hopefully the new governor would not veto it. Any comments on that?
We can only hope. And that's where we need a lot of advocacy. Trout Unlimited, whether individual chapters, state council, individuals, because the main reason it got vetoed was because of organized political pressure. From what I understand, that's the reason for the veto.
Okay. A few more questions here. Do you have drones with thermal cameras for research? Interesting question.
We don't have those. I have certainly seen them, and I think they're probably going to become a lot more common, and they are a really good way to find those thermal refuge areas in a stream. And, in places, they're important on a lot of streams, and I'm sure they are on ours, but they, it would be a good way to find those areas and figure out whether we can enhance those areas to improve things more. You can have a thermal refuge area where you've got cold water coming in, but if it's nothing but a shallow riffle, the trout that are in it are going to be sitting ducks for predators. So it may be the kind of place where you could put some habitat enhancement in to allow more fish to survive in those areas. So it would be a good thing to know. We don't have that technology right now, but it's out there and it's becoming more common. And at some point, probably after my career, the biologists will have access to that stuff.
Yeah, it's about 10K. I was listening to a Vermont Battenkill thing a couple of weeks ago. It's about 10K, and they're looking to get the same thing for exact reason you were talking about. Yep. For the streams, especially in the fall, find out about the thermal stuff. So,
yep.
That's interesting. Has there been any improvement in the snot rock algae issue? What's the latest on the snot rock?
Rock snot or Didymo. Yeah, it's interesting. That's kind of fallen off everybody's radar. I haven't read anything about Didymo in a long time. We found it once a few years ago in one section of Clear Creek in Arcade, and we've never seen it again. It grows under very specific conditions, and I think we had just the right conditions that spring. We had very low flows. We had no floods, no high waters to scour it away. And I think it just had a chance to grow under perfect conditions. And it's not normal conditions that we'd have there in the spring, and we haven't seen it again. The last I had read on it, and it's been a while, the same researcher that originally sounded the alarm that Didymo was going to end aquatic life as we know it, and all the trout streams were going to be wiped out, had now come to the conclusion that it's actually native to North America in our streams, and it's always been here, and it's probably only bloomed because of changing environmental conditions that we've probably caused. But in Western New York, we haven't seen it again. It hasn't been reported to me, and I've never seen it again in the section of Clear Creek where we found it.
Well, that's
so it's probably still out there, but it hasn't been an issue, and we haven't seen it again.
Well, that's good news. Does the Pike Dam removal engineering have any applicability elsewhere in our regional streams?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the same type of structure that we use there could be used on a lot of different areas. There's different ways to do what we did. That was a way that Tom Hoffman and myself were familiar with and fairly comfortable with. And in the feasibility study, it's one that the engineers said will work here for the objectives that we needed. One of the things we needed to do was to make sure that anything we put back there would not be considered a dam anymore, because part of the thing going on here is that that was a registered dam before we took it out, meaning there were regulations to it, and the town of Pike was really responsible for maintaining it, which they did not have the hundreds of thousands of dollars it would have taken to do that. So we made very sure in the engineering design and the construction that it would be built in a way so that it would no longer be considered a registered dam. But yeah, that same design could be used in a number of different places. We actually used on a much smaller scale. We built some engineered rock riffles in some streams over in Allegheny County as a way to make culverts passable. It was where culverts had a drop out of them, drop 2 or 3 feet, so the fish couldn't get up into the culverts. So we built engineered rock riffles to actually raise the pool elevation and flood those pools, but still make it so the fish could get upstream into the pools. So we use the same type of structures, much smaller versions of them, to actually make culverts passable without having to replace the culvert.
And Scott, I don't know if you opened your chat box. I just put that address in there that one of the people submitted earlier about if that's the one where you get the locator. Do you see that? Did it come out to everyone there?
I'll actually have to, let me, well,
okay, yeah, I'm trying to think of a solution for this, but
yeah, I'm gonna have to get back because I just know I
That's
go
okay.
into DE. I've got DEC locator, info locator. I've got a bookmark for that, so I'm not exactly sure if that's it.
Okay.
If you just go to the, if you go into Google and put in NYS DEC info locator, or it's NYDEC, and go to our website and put in info locator in the search engine, it'll get you to it. So I apologize, I'm not sure if that's the right one or not. And I actually can't even get out of this to get to
Can Chuck jump in for a second?
sure.
Yeah. I just put that in a different search engine and it came up with what we're looking for. So
Okay,
it's right.
good, thank you.
Okay.
That was the easiest way to.
Thanks, Chuck. That was a good idea. I was taking a screenshot with my phone. I was going to text to Scott, but then I probably could have done that because the cameras tell me, do you want me to go to right there? Do you want me to connect? So collectively, no, good suggestion. The other comment here was that, and I think this is a comment pertaining to your chat earlier, Chuck, which was in terms of the veto, that even the Soil and Water District also opposed it. And then this last comment is something that I'm going to also echo. And it says, thank you, Scott, for all the work you and your colleagues do. Volunteering for the stream surveys was a lot of fun. And before I turn it over to Joe for the closing remarks, I also want to say thank you very much for the presentation. It is always among the most, if not the most, well attended. And of course, thank you for all the work that you and your colleagues do. So thank you very much. And there are no further questions that I see. Although it
Just
does
want
look
to
like a
say
couple just came in. So
thanks for everybody's attention on here and all the good questions. I appreciate that.
with that, Joe, we'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Bill. And Scott, yeah, I'd like to echo my thanks for you going into the office this evening and doing this excellent presentation, and to the whole group for some really good questions. I know we appreciate all your help, and you've been a great friend and partner of ours.